June 18th Planning Board meeting to order. And first on the agenda is the minutes.
Madam Chair, excuse me. Madam Chair, I recommend the minutes of June 4th, 2019 as corrected.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, we have public comment, and this is for anybody who wants to comment on anything that is not on the agenda, just a comment or something they'd maybe like to see the board pick up at some future time. Is there anybody who wishes to make any sort of comment? Okay. Next are releases. The first on the agenda is William Buchanan, a request for a covenant release. And this looks like it was ancient and it was never signed off on and filed and completed, but it was passed. Is that correct, Tom?
It was, and in reviewing this, I had note that in Mr. Buchanan's letter that he included as a plot plan showing the lot that pertains to the planning board covenant. And I don't know that I saw that document. So it is ancient history, in that, I have in the absence of that, I've made a slide of a picture, if I may. So, if I may, the lot release says essentially to release Lot 4 and Lot 2B. As Mr. Buchanan points out in his letter to the board, I'm the owner of Lot 2B and Lot 4 as shown on the plan in Falmouth. 2 being in court, land court, request the planning board release from the covenant, as sufficient access is now provided off Wildwood Circle in Spectacle Pond and Hatch Road. So here, prior to Wildwood Circle being constructed, there wasn't a way to get to 2B. So that had a covenant on it that essentially said, will not be subdivided into additional building lots until released by the planning board at such time that sufficient access is provided. Well, Wildwood Circle, which has been constructed, provides that access to 2B. The mystery that I had, and I did not get a chance to confer with Mr. Buchanan on this and hoped he would be here this evening, was where's Lot 4? So I've gone through our parcels in the neighborhood here and have been unable to identify where parcel 4 is. We've got 2B here. There isn't a parcel 4, and when I did a search of Mr. Buchanan's parcels that he held, I didn't come across Lot 4. So I think we are sufficiently set to release Lot 2B from the covenant, but I am unaware where Lot 4 is at. So if the board wishes, because I think Mr. Buchanan has a closing coming up that he's very much wanting to get to, if the board is comfortable with a two-step process here in releasing Lot 2B, which we know has that adequate access to it, and in the absence of knowing exactly where Lot 4 is, we come back and talk about that at our meeting in a week from now.
I got a question, Tom.
Ma'am.
Though, because since we can't find Lot 4 on there, and Lot 2B has adequate access, if we release 2B, but 4, by releasing that, it makes 4 totally landlocked without any access. Is that going to pose a problem? Do we have to release both of them at one time?
Well, like I said, I don't know where Lot 4 is, and Lot 2B can be accessed from Wildwood Circle. So here you see the frontage for Wildwood Circle, and we highlighted Lot 2B in the yellow. And as you can see, that butts right up to Wildwood Circle. So where Lot 4 is remains a mystery at this point.
Mr. Buchanan, I have.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Buchanan, I did not recognize you.
I have the
Come on up.
plan, it shows you there.
We met last week, and
Here's the land-coded plan.
Thank you.
Okay,
so,
and this is the one that you're in
All right.
question, okay? This is the way the land was subdivided. My original 2 acres came this way, okay? You can see where the line went. On my original 4.5 acre piece I had.
alrighty, so
Okay.
portions, as Mr. Buchanan is showing me here with his plan, and once again, apologize for totally drawing a blank on.
Okay.
Like, where did that guy in the orange shirt is over there? So essentially, 2B included portions of 4, and it looks like portions of 4 have been all subsumed into Lot 2B?
Right.
Okay. Mystery solved. Lot 2B is Lot 2B and Lot 4.
Because this one's already been, lot 5 has already been released,
Correct.
okay?
All right. With that mystery solved, including who Mr. Buchanan is and where Lot 4 is. So at that point, being ancient history, I think it's perfectly fine for the board to vote to release these 2 lots from the covenant.
May I have a motion to that effect?
I have a question.
Make some
Okay.
copies of this.
Are you saying that Lot 4 is totally within Lot 2B? I'm not understanding what you're saying because we can't see it.
Yeah.
This is my original piece of land that I had crossed over here to mine. Then I wound up buying these 3 lots off of Wildwood Circle, had the plan re-subdivision into 2 2-acre lots. Okay, that's the original lot line. This new 2-acre lot cut through here, so this becomes one piece here, because it's land courted. I had to land court my property because it was the title defect. This has already been signed off and released, that's already been sold. to the
That's
government.
5, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that plan is adequate. It shows a dotted line on a Lot 4.
That's the title, that's a land court.
I know, but normally when we're looking at a lot and we do it, they're solid lines.
Did you see?
I'm confused by what's,
This is the subdivision
Yeah,
plan.
it's this triangle.
but, well, I don't know. The most subdivisions plans I see, the lots we're talking about are solid lines and the dotted lines aren't lots. That's just my opinion.
I'll show you the subdivision plan that Brian Curry signed off in 2000. Okay, and this is land courted,
Okay,
which we're showing the right-of-way through the driveway and stuff.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is your plan to sell this as a single piece? So they'll be buying 2 and 4, 2B and 4 together, so that this solid line actually outlines?
When their deed goes through, it'll have to be, it'll be written as Lot 2B, and then this one here will be separate, because this is land courted.
So there's really a solid line around?
I understand. I just don't think the plan he's showing us is clear. That's, it's a technicality.
Okay, I don't know what weight that should
Yeah.
have. You want me to have it down?
That-
Yeah, Paul. Paul,
I'd like to make a motion. So this was referred to as ancient history twice. I think it should be decided as an administrative matter, and I think that can be handled by the planning department.
it could be, but it's usually a vote of the planning board to release the covenant, and it is ancient history.
Well, my concern always is that that we're giving something that didn't get asked for, or as the new guy, still a year later, the new guy's always, oh, we got this thing. And the new guy, well, he certainly won't know about this thing. So I'm always cognizant of that, which is why I did this sort of search of, is there a Lot 4? Now, there doesn't appear to be a Lot 4 that's designated on our current assessor's maps. And as we know, under 81X, you can erase a lot line by simply going to the registry. The fact that 2B is shown on the assessor's maps, which are the basis of our GIS, it certainly appears, based on Mr. Buchanan's information, that 4 is part of 2B. subdivision plan you said?
Well, these are just plans of my original piece of property that was showing my septic. And I just thought this was kind of clear off when I brought this in. This is 1984.
Yeah, that's the one we looked at the other day.
Acre piece over here, okay. All the plans and stuff that I had, okay. So this is the piece that's solely separated of this 2 acre here, and then we subdivided it and made that division, okay. I just brought this in to clarify.
So it's certainly the board's call, and I'm fairly comfortable that what we see here, 2B, is
What it is.
as assumed at Lot 4, and there isn't actually a Lot 4 to be released other than the lot that shows in the land court plan.
So, and because we always vote the covenants, as a board, we have to vote to release it too.
So Paul, do you want to amend your motion?
I withdraw the motion.
Okay, so then I need a motion to,
I move to approve lot number 2B and lot number 4 as shown on the plan to be released from the covenant.
I'll second.
John?
Just one, excuse me, just one question. I didn't go out there, but I presume the road is constructed now?
Yes, I went onto the, I did not get a chance to drive by, but I went on to our aerial photography on our GIS, and the road is there, the road is in.
Okay, thank you. I'm all set, thanks.
Okay.
Essentially, what the outline you see here, pointing with the pen won't help. The outline you see here, this gray indicates a paved surface.
All right, thank you.
So it has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Okay.
I just have a comment. We voted a year or two ago that we were gonna have things shown us on our display so we could see them and not look at paper plans. I don't wanna change our policy, to just do things on the fly, but this is from so long ago, we just let it go.
That is
But I
the
don't
why.
wanna make sure that people understand, when they come in, they should have it on a slide so we can see it. But this is
Absolutely.
ancient. Good luck.
Okay, next we have another release, Cape Club request for lot release, and we all went out there and looked at the property and what was going on, and had a golf cart tour of it all, and we've had a stream of correspondence, so, any discussion on this? John?
I would say, I looked at all the information that we received today, and I think that if Mr. McGrath is willing to take the responsibility for this road, it's acceptable to me. I know in the past, roads have been built without inspection, either through error or through ignorance of the law. Mr. McGrath sent his resume here, and I think if anybody knows the substance of a road, and he says he inspected it, and, but that also means he takes the responsibility for the road, and not the town. So how we structure that, and I'm not sure what the bond is for anyway. This is the first time I've been involved in a bond from the town as a board member. But I have no issues with the way the road is constructed, as long as he's taking responsibility for it.
Yeah, Charlotte?
There's been a lot of correspondence, and quite a bit of it's from our town planner. I wonder, Tom, if you could talk us through this.
Certainly. So, the process under subdivision control is, people come in and they get a subdivision approved, and there's a covenant on all the lots. You can't sell them until the improvements are in, the road, the drainage, the sidewalks, and all those sort of goodies that come with it. Typically, at some point, the developer's at a point where they don't want to finish the entire subdivision, and they want to put a base course of pavement down. Pavement is laid in 2 courses, usually 2.5 for the first course and 1.5 inches for the finished course. So usually the first 2.5 inches of pavement are put down over top of the base and the gravel and all the compaction and all that sort of stuff. And they ask to have the lots released, and they post a bond to assure that the road is completed. that the final work is done, the final course pavement is done, street trees are put in, street lights, bounds, whatever those things that are on the punch list are. So the process is, we inspect roads, and we have an inspection protocol in our subdivision regulations. This protocol, based on our conversations with engineering over the last year, have not been uniformly applied. It seems like for some subdivisions, there was inspections that weren't done, there were reports that weren't completed, and we have some mysteries. We had one of these mysteries with Cypress Street last year about inspections that weren't done to ensure that the road was going to be put in place and put down the way that it's supposed to be. So under our requirements, when you want to get an inspection, you notify the town 24 hours in advance. Engineering and I have a conversation about it. They go out to inspect the road. And this is the protocol we've been following right along on Cape Club Estates up until this fall. At this point, they asked for permission to pave. We noted in consultation with engineering that they hadn't had a chance to inspect some of that final work prior to the paving. And so I sent a note back under the rules and regulations that says, no, don't pave. We still have inspections to do, and there's some questions about what's on the ground that you're about to pave over. Things that are much more difficult to determine if there's asphalt on top of them, one of those being soil compaction. So we sent out a note the day before they wanted to pave at 6 a.m. and said, you know, based on our review and based on the inspections, no, don't pave. But they did. So our engineering division was out there during the course of things. They got there at 7, and were walking the site and saw a couple things, a couple areas, 2 areas in particular where they were concerned that the soil was soft to walking across. Now, this is soil that's going to support pavement, and pavement for years and years and years, and all the vehicles and all the traffic that's going to come across that. So we have a protocol we've been following, and the developer's been following. And it's worked very well up until the other day when we said, you know, you're not ready to pave, don't pave, and they did. So our concern is the road put in per the requirements, per the standards? Because over the 25 years or so I've been doing this in Massachusetts, the principal complaint that I get on a pretty regular basis is from residents saying, my road doesn't work, my road isn't right, that drainage is whatever it happens to be. These complaints typically don't come in the early days of a subdivision. They typically come in the later days with a second or third owner when the developer is out of the picture. Now, this is a privately held road, and it's going to be a privately held road, but there's nothing that prohibits residents of town from petitioning their government to have the road accepted as a public way. So whenever we build a road, we want to build it to the exact same standard, and we use the exact same process when we do this. So in this case, we've got some concerns about what's on the ground, what was on the ground, and what was paved over. And we can't really determine what that bond amount is. So when we ask for that bond is the dollar amount to complete the subdivision to the standard. So we don't know that the subdivision has been built to the standard because we weren't out there for that final inspection and didn't give permission for the paving per our subdivision regulations prior to them doing this paving. So the first question is, well, what's the bond amount? Do we have a bond that's sufficient to make sure that whatever shortcomings may be in the road because it was paved without our inspection, you know, what's that dollar amount? And we frankly can't determine that without knowing what's in the road. And so typically if you had something like this, much like with Cypress Street, we said, well, pull some cores out of the road every 100 feet. Pull the core out, we'll send it to the lab for an analysis to see if the material is proper, if it's sized properly, the zones, if the compaction is proper, and essentially what we've paved over is fine. So in the absence of that, I can't tell you what the bond amount should be. Now, the developers have a punch list that they've put together, and what we typically do is after the inspection, after the road's been put in, and they give us this bond amount, we have our engineers look at that punch list to see is it inclusive of all the work that remains to be done, and are the dollar amounts associated with that work to be done adequate? Because if we have to do this work at some point in the future, if the development goes belly up And it's on our nickel to get it done. We have to get the work done, and we have to pay prevailing wages, which is more than what the marketplace has to pay for. So throughout my tenure, you really don't want to be in a position where you're sort of moving a road along that may be a problem or may not be a problem in 10 or 15 years. But the best thing we can do for the citizens of Falmouth, current and future, is to make sure that the road they're driving on every day is built to the spec and properly installed, so we don't have these complaints and these concerns from people who paid good money to live in the town, in the development, for a road that's coming apart. I explain it on a pretty regular basis. Very few of us build roads, but most of us have painted something before. So when you paint something, if you don't scrape it, prime it, sand it prior to, that paint's just gonna peel off. So if you put pavement down on something that's not properly prepared, that pavement is gonna come apart because of a lack of compaction, a lack of the installation of the road. And at some point, that will fall on the homeowners association to fix, or the town if someone petitions the town to have a road accepted. Now, there's quite a long and cumbersome process, but this is the point to make sure that things are fine, not at a point in, some years down the road, to say, well, yeah, this is a little soft, we're gonna go ahead and pave that, we're gonna cut some of these patches out. Because each time you cut a patch out of a road, you've got an issue, and typically, highway folks wanna see your road infrareded so you don't have a seam where you cut that out at, because seams cause freeze and thaw. Now, in addition to the timing of the paving, apparently, National Grid is getting ready to come out and put gas in, because they came to the engineering division and said, we want to get a road opening permit for gas. And they go, well, we don't do that because it's a private road. It doesn't come to our engineering division. But our engineering division alerted me that in addition to whatever they might have paved, chances are that's going to get cut up by the utility company that's coming out to put in the gas lines that usually are in the road right-of-way, but not necessarily under the road. But because we've got a narrower road right-of-way under this subdivision, chances are that asphalt or that gas line is going to be in the edge of the road. So in addition to paving it, we're going to cut it back open again for gas and utilities and things like that. The combination of all those things, to me, doesn't bode well for this road in the future. It may be fine, and if we had had our engineers out there, and I explained to the applicants, we've got a meeting this week, and we've got a meeting next week. So if you don't get everything buttoned up for the bond for the meeting on the 18th, we have a meeting on the 25th. But they were, for whatever reasons, they were, quite determined to pave the day they were quite determined to pave. So my concern is, are we, first off, have another one of these instances where, in spite of whatever the rules are, people are just going to do what they want to do. So if you have a protocol, if you have a rule that says you can't pave without permission, and you do, that's the first issue. And then if you paved it and we didn't inspect it, that's the second issue. And determining what the bond amount is to ensure that the road will be sufficiently completed is the third issue.
So that was a really full answer. Sounds like they were told not to do it, they did it, and your recommendation would be, don't release until they've done it properly.
Until we know what the bond amount is by doing this additional testing, so we know what the condition of the road is.
I have a question for you. I don't know that you would know. I live on a private road, which as nearly as I can guess was probably put in either 1970 or 71. That's when the first house on the road was built, so sometime about then. There is nothing standard about that road. It is paved, it is the wrong width, it is lousy paving. Sure enough, the gas company dug it up. I mean, it's just not standard. At what point did this protocol become standard and become enforced in Falmouth?
Perhaps I could answer that?
Our subdivision standards have a date of 2008 on it, but I'm sure that's not, let's see, historical information regulation of subdivision started in Falmouth, May 1924.
1972 was when you first started with 8 inches of gravel, and you had to have complete drainage designs. There was a previous version, but they didn't require the kind of submissions on the drainage thing.
And who's speaking now?
My name is Micah McGrath. I was trying to be helpful.
Thank you. So since 2008, these have been promulgated, they've been there. Have they been enforced?
Well, as I said, we have had what I would likely characterize, not being disrespectful to my predecessor, what's the word I would use? An inconsistent application of the policy of the town. I've explained to folks on a pretty regular basis, I'm not smart enough to know which of the regulations they meant and which of the ones they were kidding about. So I sort of try to touch them all. If it says, this is what you need to do, then that's what you need to do. I don't have an ability to give somebody a pass on something. So I look at what our regs are, what our rules are, and that's how we direct the folks who are doing development.
I suppose we'd want to back up our rules.
But
Thank
could-
you, John.
So, he said that Lawrence Lynch did the paving, and the way a road, the road works is the engineer will, before the paving is done, sets up grade stakes. Every 25 feet, every 50 feet, the contractor will grade the road to the proper height. Then Lawrence Lynch comes in, after the dense grade has been installed, they grade all the gravel. Then the next day, they come in with their compactor, they compact all the gravel, and then the next day, they pave it. So I am very sure that this road was built to the proper standards up to this point. And as Mr. McGrath said in his paperwork to us, for the next year and a half or 2 years, they're gonna be constructing houses out there. They're gonna have cement mixers, they're gonna have lumber trucks, they're gonna have all kinds of vehicles. That's why you put a base coat down, and you don't do the top coat till you're all done, because you don't want to get it ruined. But if it gets damaged, you have the opportunity to repair it before you do the final coat. And as I said, it has not been uncommon for road builders in a subdivision to make an error and not notify the engineering department. Again, either through ignorance or neglect. And when that happens, historically, the engineer takes responsibility, writes a letter to the town or to the engineering department, says, I inspected the road, I inspected the drainage, and I take responsibility for it. And it goes forward from there. And the other thing I want to mention is the part about the gas company. I looked at the layout of the gas line. The gas line will go along the side of the road. It only crosses the road at one point in the back where the circle is. And the gas company doesn't cut across the road anymore. They auger underneath the road. They will not damage that road. Because the gas is on one side of the street, some of the houses on the other side of the street. To get the gas over there, when they're building the houses, they just auger under the road. They don't cut, they used to cut them, they don't cut them anymore. The electric company will cut them, but not the gas company.
Except on our road.
Well, it may have been done a while ago.
Yeah.
No? Well,
I think your road's 1928, if I remember.
Oh, but they just put the gas line in about,
but
Year and a half
the
ago.
point I'm trying to make is, there's a lot of safety precautions that go into a road today. And when you have a contractor like Lawrence Lynch, has probably done, I don't know, maybe 1 million miles of paving. I mean, and Mr. McGrath with his resume and his experience, if he's willing to take that responsibility, I don't have any issues with it.
Could I speak?
not yet. Pam?
This is my conundrum. It's always my conundrum. That if you have rules and regulations, you make a choice, either they're all gonna be followed, or you make exceptions, and this road, or this home, or whatever it is, somehow isn't built to the way the engineers wanted it. And I'm just concerned that we then open up Pandora's box in the next road that comes in, and it has nothing to do with Mr. McGrath and his reputation. It's, how do we go forward, and do we go forward listening to our town planner, who said, I told them not to do it, and they did it. So, you know, a conundrum for me.
Jim?
This is the same road when we went out to look at it a week ago,
Mhm.
and they were just building it then. They were just pouring in, the gravel was just coming in, right? Now it's paved?
Okay,
After all that rain.
while it
Well-
was raining.
Well, and it's quite possible that it would be fine. However, we didn't have the full inspection protocol. We got a letter that said there's 12 inches of gravel down in 5 different places that Mr. McGrath produced for the engineering department. They went out there and looked and said, well, we now have a statement about gravel, we don't have a statement about compaction. So we went on with this sort of litany, and I think it was probably pretty late in the afternoon when they got this last information into the engineering division. So at that point, I think my last email was at 3:30 in the afternoon, after he had dropped off information to the engineering division. And the engineering division said, yeah, we looked at this, but, you know, we're not comfortable with doing this because we haven't been out for an inspection. Once again, in that protocol, you ask for an inspection in writing 24 hours prior to, so everyone's on notice about what's going on and everybody's on site to make sure that things are done. And as I said, when I was talking to Mike earlier, I said, this is nothing personal. This is about everybody has to follow the same rules. If you do great work, then we have a great amount of comfort in the fact that you follow the rules. And if you're one of those people, if there are those sort of people who don't do great work, then we have a robust protocol to make sure that those folks are, you know, building to the same standard as we are. So I'm simply looking at the rules that we have in place and employing them and advising developers that, you know, how they should proceed. And if they do proceed that way, and I think to Mr. McGrath's point on one of his emails, I see no reason to proceed at the developer's risk. Well, that's, now we're just trying to sort of assess what is the developer's risk. Is the developer's risk, it's probably okay. And we've talked about how probably okay really isn't the standard that we're working on with the new planner and the new zoning administrator and new folks in the engineering division. Pretty good, pretty close, really has always been sort of the standard in Falmouth, it seems. But that's not the standard that we're operating off of these days. If we have quantifiable criteria to get things done, then we should use it, and we make people aware of it, and they follow that. We can inspect things, and everything goes forward, you know, as best as can. But
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I understand kind of the rush to get it done because of the weather. You're always working under those constraints. But I also look at it as there's some new sheriffs in town, and it's going to be on their backs. So I tend to agree with that town planner.
I too do not wish this to reflect on Mike's credibility as an engineer. He's been here a long time doing the engineering. But I got a real problem when our professionals say, you cannot do it now because we have not had a chance to inspect. We got pictures of engineering staff out there saying, this is kind of soft, and it is for 15 feet or for 10 feet. And I have to believe what they're seeing. And there's a lot of wash into the drainage area too, which is gonna kind of plug that drainage area up. I don't think it was anywhere near capable of being paved under our rules and regulations. And if we pass this, if we release the lots, I think we'd be culpable of doing so, even if Mike says, well, he'll take the responsibility, but then there's something here saying that he doesn't see why his client should be held responsible for it. So I'm not comfortable.
And we have seen where these come back to by the Sunset Estates, I believe.
Sunset, Cypress.
Cypress, I mean, there's been a number of them that come back at us. And I think the standards for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes, Charlotte.
I can sort of see Pam's point, you know, it's a conundrum. If you've got a rule and we're here to enforce it, why aren't we just doing that? I think one of the reasons we have a board rather than just a rule book, is we can make exceptions if we see fit. This seems really blatant, that they're told, don't pave it, and they pave it the next day. And it's not, how's that readily explained? The town has made quite an investment in professional staff. And we really, I feel, this is the second time within just a few short months that we've had, oh, they didn't do what we approved. I think we really need to make it pretty clear that we intend to back, except in really exceptional circumstances, really intend to back our professional staff. You can't just ignore them.
Yeah.
It also sets a precedent for those that come down the line. Well, you know, you allowed this, and I know you said no, but we did it anyway. So we have two other instances that say you did the same thing, so why come after me? If you allow things that, and I don't want to see that. I've been through that before, and I think that's a very, very bad precedent to set, so.
So,
When do I get to speak?
you can speak, Mike, but I think it's really our discussion here when you're talking about a covenant release or
I understand that, but there's certain aspects from our side that aren't being disclosed as far as I'm concerned.
We should
Is
hear them.
everybody on the board finished?
I don't know whether everybody's on. I saw John raise his hand again.
I just would like to say, again, like Mr. Bont said, pretty close has been the standard in the past, and I don't agree with that. That was never good enough. And I just want to say that we don't want to set a precedent, but the precedent's, I'm trying to explain, the precedent has already been here. If someone puts a road in and they didn't get an inspection, historically, the town has accepted a letter from an engineer taking the responsibility for it. That has been very common. It's not it's just been a common practice. And it's not a common practice not to call the engineering department. But if someone had an oversight, if an architect or an engineer takes responsibility for it, it's been acceptable practice.
Anybody else? Okay, Mike, now you can talk.
He's out of words.
Where is it? While he's, if you could look at it. I brought a copy of the plan.
Do we have this in a PDF form so people at home can see what we're talking about?
I think so. They're trying to find it.
It's supposed to be three.
Double click on it.
Ah.
Okay, there it is.
So, my name is Michael McGrath. I designed this subdivision. How do I get this to move? Oh.
Scroll back, yeah.
There is a low point in this system, and I didn't really make it bold, but it's about where it's somewhere in here. And when they graded the road, there was a rainstorm, and it was before they put the gravel in, and the area flooded. And it took a while for the subbase to dry out. Then Lawrence Lynch was putting down the gravel. I witnessed the gravel being installed. I actually dug holes through the gravel to make sure that there was a sufficient thickness, and I certified it. I said at the time that this road, the major road, was suitable to pave. And the reason that I said that was the following day, we're supposed to Lawrence Lynch was going to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning and start paving. And they said that if this area got saturated, it might be 2 weeks, and they had a big job to go to, so they really wanted to pave the road. Before you put the binder down, all the catch basin covers are covered, all the catch basin frames of grades are covered, so that water from the surface doesn't fill up your drainage systems with silt. And so, what I said at my letter was that the major road was ready to be paved, and that the little cul-de-sac, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with this. When I was out there in the afternoon, I said Gulfview Drive wasn't quite ready for, I'm pointing with my fingers. This road was not compacted in the late afternoon when I was there. So what I did was, after work on the way home, I stopped and I walked this personally. I had already walked the main road, and I walked this personally. I had interviewed the Lawrence Lynch people. I looked at the roller. It was the appropriate size roller. They had passed over the right amount. And so when I walked out there at 6 o'clock, I inspected Gulfview Drive. So I wrote, now, don't forget, Lawrence Lynch is supposed to come the next day or they won't come for weeks. So at 7:21, I wrote to the town saying, the gravel is suitably compacted and graded, the contractor can pave now. The pavement is binder only. During the construction of the buildings, the binder will be subject to loading from concrete trucks and other construction vehicles. If there's any weakness in the gravel, such as flaws that show up in a year, any settlement can be repaired. However, and then I said, I did see a flaw that he had to fix, and he did fix it right away. And when I went out and looked at the binder course, don't forget, Lawrence Lynch started this at 6 o'clock in the morning. So later that morning, the town found a soft spot somewhere in here. Well, my attitude is, we will go to the place that's identified in the photographs, remove some of the binder and replace it. I gave you a list of roads. There's David Peterson, when he built his subdivisions, that's exactly what we did. We put down the binder, and after a year or two, we put down the finish course. So I looked at it that, especially with the potential damage that could have been caused by the rain, that was an absolutely appropriate step to take. I'm sorry that the town engineering department didn't agree with me, but I'm sorry that you think I did something wrong, but I believe in the long run, I did what's best for the road and best for the project. The other thing is that the developer wants to build some models so he can start getting sales. And so once the performance bond is posted, we can apply for building permits for a couple of buildings out there. So the key thing there is there's only a certain prime selling time. So that's why there was a rush. It was a rush because of the weather, and we're also thinking that if we delay this into July, we won't be able to get the foundations in some of the vertical construction for the models. So Kelly Cardoza is here, and she represents the developer. If you have anything to add, Kelly.
Hi, my name is Kelly Durfee Cardoza, and most of you had an opportunity to go out and look at the project last week with me, or on the 6th. First, I want to say that it was not their intention to defy the regulations, and it is not their intention to set a precedent. They felt very squeezed by the fact that they would lose their pavement, and they therefore elected to apply it at 6 o'clock the next morning. The first bond dollar amount that we submitted to you had an assumption that there would be payment on the 24th of May. this was an incredibly wet spring, and so paving contractors have been pushed and pushed and pushed. So, I mean, Mr. Bott, you'll recall that it didn't happen on the 24th, and I sent you something saying that I'm hoping it will be the next week. And then when you were there on the 6th, we were hoping it would be end of the week on the 6th. So they knew they had an obligation to meet with the town, and they fully respect the town's regulations, and I was asked to provide the owner's apologies to you if you feel like he wasn't respecting your authority or your rules, because that isn't the case. They just felt like they didn't have a choice and that they would lose this summer, and therefore they chose to do this. I know you've struggled a little bit with the idea of what the bond amount should be, and one of the things that I'd like to propose is that we bond the binder course fully. So we have the costs from Lawrence Lynch, and rather than assuming that the binder course has been placed on the ground, since it has not been formally approved by the engineering department, then the amount that we'd like to suggest goes into the bond is the full amount for the cost of the gravel, the cost of the grading, the cost of the rolling, and the cost of the installation of the binder course. You would then control that amount of money should there be a problem and you not be happy with the process or something happens in the development. I don't foresee that. This developer is committed to creating a successful road system, and it's going to be part of the Cape Club, which they will continue to own. So they're very much invested in having the people who own those homes be happy, because they're going to be their direct neighbors. The other thing I would ask you to consider is that we provided the form of the bond to Mr. Bott and to Mr. Duffy, Town Council, on the 24th of May. We don't yet have feedback on the form of the bond, so we'd ask if you could consider, while you're thinking about how this dollar amount should be, whether you would consider releasing it subject to ultimate approval by Mr. Duffy, that the language is satisfactory. The bond documentation was prepared by counsel for FWG, the owner of the Cape Club, but we're happy to make whatever changes or edits Mr. Duffy sees appropriate as soon as we get his comments. That's really all I have. I just don't want you to feel that they set out to defy you, because that wasn't the intent on the part of this owner.
Thank you. Tom?
Well, what I would recommend is that we're going to be back here in a week. In a week, we should take a look at the bond amount after our engineers have reviewed it. But I think in the interim, in order to understand fully what's going on there, that we go ahead and pull cores out of the road, get that done ASAP, and to a lab for analysis, so we know that things are fine. Frankly, it's going to be much easier to fix things now than it is to fix things with an active subdivision. So if we can get that work done, have it verified by our engineering department and the amount of the bond, and I am happy to see that because I hadn't had a chance to look at this earlier that you had sent me, that the full amount of the binder is in the bond amount, because it's the expectation of the engineering department that they may be ripping up a lot of that anyhow in order to do proper compaction and particularly these two areas. And those are just the two areas they happen to be on, which is just one side of the road after the road was done. Because I'm always that person who is operating under an abundance of caution, because I know what the person who succeeds me is going to get in 10 or 15 years, because that's what we do. I mean, it's sort of standard that people go, my road is coming apart, and we just want to make sure that things are swell. So I would say do the course, back here in a week with a bond amount vetted by the engineering division. Mr. Duffy's in court much of this week, and he's still short-staffed. They haven't hired their associate town counsel, so we'll get down to the form of the bond that I shared with him, and we've talked about it a couple times, but haven't got to the point where we've got something to send back to Mr., and I mispronounce his name all the time, Shelmarin? Thank you. That'd be my suggestion for proceeding.
Who actually does the coring, and then who does the analysis of the corings?
Typically, the contractor's gonna do those corings, and they're gonna send them to the lab.
Can there be
And
a
those lab
one-week
results-
turnaround?
Huh?
Can there be a one-week turnaround in the results? Do you
I don't know.
Lawrence Lynch did use a device that measures the compaction in the pavement, and it was all over 90, I think it was 91 to 95%. So they've already done some non-destructive testing of the pavement itself. So there is one spot that I identified that they have to remove and replace. So I don't think it's necessary to do corings. The last time I did corings, they were, I don't know how to say it. They were not indicative, I believe, of what actually happened. I did cores every 100 feet for over 2,500 feet. I think it was in Bourne. And the bottom line is, I saw this gravel. I saw it compacted. I don't think you need to worry about the fact that they went out and there was some rain overnight and there was a soft spot. We agreed with the town that we would take the binder up at that one identified spot and fix it. And as I said, the traffic will identify the other spots just by the loads.
Jim, you had a comment?
Just on the format, we usually have a locus and an arrow north on the plans. Paul usually brings that up, but I don't
No,
see
we
it on
didn't
either of
this
these drawings. It seems to be like they're dropping some of our procedures because they're in a hurry.
Yeah.
No, these are graphics. These are a portion of a big plan.
Well, this
And
is
on the
all we're
big-
looking at. So how does anyone at home know where this is with no locus and no arrow north?
All right. It's supposed to be a graphic on the screen. I understand what you're saying.
Which
but-
way's north?
All right, north is this way.
The opposite of the way the plans, just pointing it out, that's something we usually.
Well, I don't know how to rotate this in your system. I'm not very.
In any case, what we're going to do is continue this to
Point
next
made.
week, continue the decision to next week, subject to the findings of either coring or a compaction measuring machine of some sort that will assure it. And subject to having,
Mr. Buffy.
an agreed-upon bond amount, and the wording agreed upon by Mr. Duffy, too. And that we will be taking up then on our meeting, at our meeting on the 25th. Did I state that correctly?
That's what I understand. We're gonna do the cores, we'll know what's done, and we'll adjust any bond amount based on not just the sub-base, just the core, but any additional compactions necessary.
There's the,
And anticipating that we will have the information that we need, then we could make a decision at that point. But if we don't have the information we need, then it would have to be continued to
I-
our next meeting date.
I just submitted the report from Lawrence Lynch on the compaction of the
Okay.
pavement. I'll be happy to give you more copies.
I think as long as our engineers are satisfied,
Great.
they can get back to us by
Mhm.
next week. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, we've never had a problem with our engineers getting back to us. John, you had another question or
If-
comment?
If the engineering department accepts the report on the compaction,
Fine,
then the coring may not be a requirement.
that's absolutely correct. That's why I stated it the way I did.
All right. Thank you.
Because there's more modern technology, I'm assuming, than putting cores in. So, okay, thank you, and we will see you next week then.
Thank you.
So. Moving on to planning board decision. The applicant is Green Ocean Car Wash LLC. Site plan review application to raise and remove the existing building in order to construct a car wash on the property, adding more than 1,000 square feet of gross floor area located at 187 T-Ticket Highway, Cape and Islands Engineering. And we have,
At this time, I need to recuse
that's
myself.
right, I forgot about that. Do you want to read the decision, Bob?
Sure, I'll read it.
You don't have a choice.
With the note that we did have correspondence from Mel Frott, Lieutenant Mel Frott of the Fire Prevention Officer with his concerns, and they've all been addressed with this decision.
Right.
Okay, draft, June 14th, 2019, motion that the planning board vote to approve the application of Green Ocean Car Wash LLC under Article 39 Site Plan Review of the zoning bylaw to raise and remove the existing building in order to construct a car wash on the property, adding more than 1,000 square feet of gross floor area located at 187 T-Ticket Highway, as depicted on plans entitled Proposed Site Development Plans at 187 T-Ticket Highway, Falmouth, Massachusetts, prepared by Cape and Islands Engineering, dated March 11, 2019, revised June 4, 2019, and June 14, 2019, scale as noted, sheets 1 through 6, along with architectural plans and elevations entitled Green Ocean Car Wash, 187 T-Ticket Highway, Falmouth, Mass. 02540, prepared by Bruce Ronan Hamilton Architects, dated June 2nd, 2019, scale as noted, sheets 1 through 4, with the following findings and conditions. Findings: the applicant, Green Ocean Car Wash LLC, is seeking to modify the planning board site plan review decision dated February 28, 2018, to construct a car wash. The applicant seeks to raise the existing structure and build a new structure on the parcel located at 187 T-Ticket Highway, map number 3714-024B000, along with associated parking, drainage, and landscaping. The parcel is .56 acres of land, 24,200 square feet, in the zone Business 2, B2. The site lies within the Little Pond Coastal Overlay District in the town's Little Pond Sewer Service Area. The wastewater division commented on the above referenced site plan in a letter dated May 23, 2019, stating the proposed development will require a variance from the Board of Selectmen under the town's flow neutral bylaw, section 18055. It is requested that the applicant provide the following information for the wastewater division's review. 1, the projected peak daily and average daily water use for the project in gallons per day, and the basis for the flow estimated, Title V basis if available, would be best for peak flow estimate. 2, size, capacity, type, and location of proposed water reclamation system to reduce water use in separator system to remove oil, grease, grit, and other contaminants from the wastewater before discharging to the sewer system. 3, monitoring and maintenance plan for the water recycling and pretreatment systems, including pump out frequency and disposal plan for materials removed from the separator. The proponent will also need to submit a sewer connection plan for wastewater division review approval, along with the sewer connection permit application. The utilities plan dated March 11, 2019, does not provide sufficient detail regarding the sewer connection, and in particular regarding the water reclamation system and system for removing contaminants from the water before discharging to the sewer. The applicant responded to the wastewater division concerns in a letter dated June 4, 2019, and the planning board finds this information sufficiently addresses the wastewater division's comment for the purpose of this decision. The Town of Falmouth Engineering Division commented on the above-mentioned site plans and referrals dated May 10th, May 30th, and June 13th, 2019. The applicant's engineer responded to the town's referrals included in a letter dated May 22nd, 2019. The planning board finds the applicant has adequately addressed the engineering division's concerns. Falmouth Fire Rescue Department commented on the above-mentioned site plan in a letter dated May 2nd, 2019, and the applicant revised plans to address the width of the driveway on the west side of the parcel. Fire Rescue also commented on an engineering comment from the May 30th referral stating the aisle widths, not including berms, should be adequate for this application. The planning board finds the applicant has adequately addressed Falmouth Fire Rescue's concerns. The Water Department, in a referral dated April 30th, 2019, stated the applicant will need to identify the required water service needed for the car wash and apply to the Water Department. The Water Department also strongly recommended the applicant upgrade to a 2-inch polyethylene line with the meter located outside of the proposed building. The department is currently in the process of replacing the water main and T-Ticket Highway during the next year and will coordinate upgrading the service line from the main to the property line. The car wash will need to have a backflow prevention and plumbing plan showing the location, type of the backflow prevention. A survey must be done when construction is near substantial completion and coordinated with the Water Department. The planning board finds the proposed modification to the site plan review decision appropriate for the site and thanks the applicant's engineer for revising plans in a timely manner based on board comment. Conditions. 1, the plan shall be constructed as approved. Any changes will be reviewed by the planning board at a public meeting to determine if a modification of this decision is necessary. pursuant to section 24183B of the zoning bylaw. No permit for occupancy shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied that the conditions of this approval have been met. 2, soundproofing measures shall be undertaken to insulate the sound decibel level associated with the vacuuming area. 3, the applicant shall install downward-facing dark sky compliant lighting as to not spill over the property line into T-Ticket Park. 4, the applicant shall provide dark green or equal awning at the pay stations to minimize visibility. 5, landscaping shall be installed in accordance with the above reference plans and shall be maintained in a healthy state.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any comments? Yes, John?
I just have a question about condition number 2, soundproofing measures. Can we be more specific? Is there any way to be more specific on what we expect for decibels, or did the applicant, I can't remember if the applicant gave us any,
There were no details given. It was the request of the 300 committee. And there was no detail given as to how they plan to go about
to do
doing
the
the sound.
soundproofing?
Yeah. Tom, was that ever in a discussion?
I think to my recollection, weren't they moved from the T-Ticket Park side
They
to
were
this side?
flipped around,
So-
yes.
So the building is actually the sound mitigation?
Okay,
That was my understanding. I could be wrong.
okay, so I don't know if there's anything else, but yes, they definitely moved it.
Yeah.
So the proposed number of vacuums is reduced from reduced to 3 and relocated to the south side of the building as a measure to reduce noise. A 6-foot-tall wooden stockade fence will be installed along the fence with the height tapering down near the sidewalk. Plantings will be installed on the car wash side of the fencing that will further serve as noise barriers.
Okay, so there are a number of
Okay.
ways, but not just for the vacuums.
All right, thank you.
We did not call out, if I may, we did not call out a particular decibel, because I can tell you, having been involved in decibel testing for wind turbines in another town, it's a very difficult thing at determining what the sound nothing is when you're trying to determine what the change in ambient sound is.
Okay, any other comments?
Just that we hope that the vegetation, the plantings and things that are going in actually do go in and take root, because we will be calling people back
Oh, yeah,
if they don't. So just wanted that to be out there.
for sure. Anything else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Okay. So we move on to Borrego Solar Systems, Inc., site plan review application to construct a 7,330,500 kilowatt large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic energy generating system at 0 Blacksmith Shop Road and 0 Locust Field Road, assessors map numbers 2202-009-000 and 2202-012-003. And we again have a motion here. Charlotte, would you like to read that?
Motion that the planning board vote to approve the application of Borrego Solar Systems Incorporated under Article 39, site plan review of the zoning bylaw for the construction of a 7,330.500 kilowatt large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic and energy storage electricity generating system located at 0 Blacksmith Shop Road and 0 Locust Field Road, assessors map 2202-009-000 and 2202-012-003, as depicted on plans entitled Site Plan Use, prepared by Borrego Solar Systems Incorporated on March 25th, 2019, revised June 3rd, 2019, scale is noted, sheets 1 through 10, with the following findings and conditions. The findings: the applicant, Borrego Solar Systems, Inc., is seeking to construct a 7,330.5, is that the correct way to read that?
I don't know. Is it 7,330,500?
But it's a decimal point.
That's right, it's a decimal point in there.
They're talking about kilowatts there, and not,
Okay, so it is .5. Thank you.
We all know how much.
It's
Kilowatt,
not
large
megawatts.
scale.
Right, okay.
It's big.
Huge. Large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic and energy storage electricity generating system located at 0 Blacksmith Shop Road and 0 Locust Field Road, Assessors Map 2202009000 and 2202012003. The subject parcel is 2,871,475 square feet and 156,946 square feet and zoned agricultural, A. The Department of Public Works Engineering Division referral dated May 14th, 2019, outlines open comments from the past referral reviewing the applicant's site plan. The applicant's engineer submitted revised plans dated May 21st, 2019, in response to the town engineering comments. The planning board finds the financial surety in the form of a decommissioning bond in the amount of $373,817.12 that the applicant will provide is compliant pursuant to Article 48, Section 240, 255, in the case of abandonment or need for decommissioning. The planning board's review does not include building code review, and the board defers to the building commissioner as to issues related to building code. The planning board would like to thank the applicant for revising plans and elevations based on board review and comment. Conditions. First, the plan shall be constructed as approved. Any changes shall be reviewed by the planning board to determine if a modification of this decision is necessary. Pursuant to Section 240-183B of the zoning bylaw, no permit for full or partial occupancy shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied that the conditions of this approval have been met. Second, the applicant shall provide a financial surety to the town in the form of a decommissioning bond in the amount of $373,817.12 pursuant to Article 48, Section 240-255, in the case of abandonment or need for decommissioning of a large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic project. The applicant should install a 7-foot chain-link fence surrounding the solar facility field as defined in the approved site plans. Fourth, the applicant shall install no trespassing signage surrounding the 3 detention basins. Fifth, the applicant may continue to utilize the constructed access road on the abutting town parcel it has previously used as shown on the approval site plan, until such time as the Board of Selectmen recommends and town meeting votes to grant the applicant a permanent easement to use the constructed access road for this purpose. It's expected the easement will be presented to the November 2019 ATM town meeting for action thereon. In the event of an unfavorable town meeting action, this condition must be revised. 6, to be formally defined in the easement reference in condition 5, the applicant shall reconstruct approximately 200 feet of the initial existing entrance roadway to the intersection of the alternate 14-foot wide gravel road pursuant to the town subdivision bylaw, minor streets roadway regulations, and will provide required stormwater infrastructure based on the subdivision road plans prepared as part of condition 5. 7th, the applicant will mitigate for the town's 25-year standard stormwater measure. 8th, the applicant shall notify the planning board by certified mail of any change in the ownership of the solar project or the underlying parcels. Such notification shall include A, new owner, contact information, if not the owner, then an attorney or agent, and B, details of transfer, such as rights, titles, or other. 9th and last, condition number 3, which dealt with the chain link fence, shall remain in effect as long as the solar facility exists on this site.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, or?
I have a question on the language on condition number 1. I don't believe there will be a certificate of occupancy on, there's no structure here to move into. So there should be some other thing that we use instead of that language.
In fact,
Throwing a switch.
we're having that discussion today. I think the chair,
I brought it up, yeah.
trained by the chair, trained by the chair, trained by the chair, trained by the chair, but you both had the same question. How do we have this condition if there's something to occupy the certificate of
The
occupancy?
lights go on?
Huh?
The lights go on?
It may be that, that condition be amended to say something to the effect of, the plan will be constructed and the system will become operational.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Much better.
So, do we make the change here, Tom, or you'll flip it?
No, I think it's fine, so wordsmithing that, and we'll wordsmith it through council, but essentially, the facility will not be available for production until the plan's been certified, because that is what, in our new zoning bylaw, we changed, that you'll give us an as-built plan before you get a CO. So comparable to that they'd give us an as-built plan that showed everything is in place.
You'll take care of that.
I suggest on that point, why don't you just change the word occupancy to operation?
Well, except our bylaw in section 241A3B doesn't say anything about operations. So when we referenced section 240B, it basically says full or partial occupancy. It goes on to say that in writing that the planning board is satisfied, shall be issued by the building commissioner until he's been notified in writing that the planning board is satisfied with the conditions of approval of the site plan. So frankly, I think 183B, in addition to mentioning the occupancy permit, goes on to say that no occupancy permit for full or partial occupancy for the project requiring planning board approval shall be issued by the building commissioner until he has been notified in writing that the planning board is satisfied that the conditions of approval on any site plan review have been met. So I think that sort of this, the facility being fully operational sort of complies with, comports with a certificate of occupancy, in that it can't be fully operational until the planning board satisfied those conditions have been met.
Paul?
Yeah, I have two other items. Condition 9 should really be part of 3, or even have a separate condition on the fence. It should be incorporated.
Just add it into 3. Okay.
And the other point that concerns me more than anything is, we're estimating a bond cost to 8 significant figures 20 years out. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Why don't we just make it $372,800? I mean, put 12 cents on a estimated cost 20 years in the future is really academic.
So you moved to cross out the 12 cents.
Well, as we talked about before, there is a decommissioning bond. That decommissioning bond is based on the cost to remove the stuff. And there's an escalation clause in that follows along as
20
well.
years in the future?
It's some sort of calculated
Compounded.
number.
What is it,
I-
2% a year?
I was involved in a lawsuit one time, and the attorney went in and asked this engineer who had 8 significant figures, "Are you sure of the 12 cents? Well, I'm not so sure. What if we make it a 0? And he went down and down until he got to a number that the engineer could agree with, and destroyed his credibility. This kind of destroys our credibility 20 years out. I think it's just practically impossible to estimate that accuracy 20 years in the future.
Yeah.
Going.
I think you rounded off.
So the changes that have been suggested in this motion are to let Tom work with anything that might have to be changed in number 1 for occupancy, to remove the 12 cents, and to put condition number 9, add that to condition 3. And does everybody agree with that? I mean, we've got to change the motion to that effect, so.
Without rereading the whole motion.
That's what I'm saying,
With that
yeah.
understanding,
Yes, with
right.
that understanding, okay. Are there any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. It'd be good to note that this is our first big solar array,
Is that right?
privately done, on the
Excuse me,
new,
it's our second,
Commercial.
well, no, isn't it the first one on the new,
the new zoning.
on
Yeah,
the new
under the new
zoning?
zoning.
So this inaugurates the new zoning. No, it's definitely our second. The EDICs will always be number 1, but still, this is a really good thing for the town.
EDIC 1A and 1B. 1B. And just as a segue to that, I did meet with the Energy Committee again last week, and they are likely, we discussed our sort of our points that we wanted to bring to the board about what's on their sort of plate moving forward. So we may hear about some additional areas or some additional opportunities for creating solar within town, based on our conversation with the Energy Committee.
Great.
Nice.
We move on to public discussion. The applicant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nature's Remedy, special permit application for a medical marijuana dispensary at 31 T-Ticket Highway, BSS Design, and I understand that's kind of backburnered still.
Yes, Nature Remedy is still working with their neighbors on conditions that were discussed here back when we were doing the initial discussion. So they're still working through things with their neighbors, and so I've requested a continuance.
They're going to have to then put in a request for, our last meeting is June 25th.
Correct.
So they will have to get in a request to extend the deadline on this.
So we'll have everything buttoned up by the 25th, or they will, as they have dutifully right along, given us an extension, we've requested one.
Mhm. Okay. Well, Mr. Halen requested
We haven't got, oh, pardon.
an appearance here tonight. What?
No, this is his usual thing.
Yeah, I know, and he's not here. So,
Can I just ask you a question on the hand?
course.
Tom Silverhouse as federal government, state government, et cetera. Who prepared this document?
which one?
This document summarizing the laws.
That is Frank Duffy.
So
And that is
it's a
what
town
he
of-
used to give his presentation.
But it should say who the origin of this is.
Oh, well,
This is town of
you
Falmouth.
can write on it.
Okay.
So, Mr. Halen's failing to show up. I don't know what else we can do.
Move that we move on to the next item on the agenda.
Yeah, we have to.
If he were to show up late, may he speak then?
We could certainly allow him to speak at that point.
If you request.
Take a motion.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to table it and keep it going until towards the end of the meeting in case he shows up? Up to you guys.
It would be a good thing to do.
Just move on.
Move on.
Okay.
Not
You
the
can take it
first
up
time.
because he's on the agenda. All right, planning board discussion, update on administrative approvals for JML Care Center and Bogosian Development.
If I may, Madam Chair. So you have in your packets a memo I prepared today regarding administrative approvals for site changes. We've had two, JML and 587 Main Street, that the board has directed staff to work on changes to the site plan. So I'm sort of going to read what I have here. So for the JML, so when the board votes for the staff to handle administrative reviews to site plan changes, I have never interpreted that as a carte blanche okay. Rather, I've interpreted that as to make sure the changes are within the bylaw and there are no adverse impacts from those changes. Such is the case for the JML Care Center in their request to replace a landscape island with additional parking spaces. So over the course of several weeks, beginning on April 23rd, I had requested the Falmouth Engineering to take a look at the plans that were submitted. On Monday, April 29th, we presented the first letter to Jim Santos of Holmes and McGrath and Greg Sirian of MedCom Architectural Group. On May 17th, we received a response letter and revised site plans from Holmes and McGrath. On May 30th, a number of revisions based on information about drainage, traffic circulation, landscaping, and ADA accessible access were all addressed. On June 6th, final plans as reviewed and approved by the Falmouth Engineering Division in consultation with the town planner were approved, and a letter was sent to the building commissioner memorializing the changes administratively approved by the board and technically vetted by the staff at the planning office and DPW's engineering division. I think this went very well because this was made based on a technical analysis of the standards in place, and changes requested prior to any work being completed were incorporated into the plans of record. So in my opinion, this went very well. We had questions, we asked questions, people answered questions, our engineers vetted those things to make sure that in replacing this landscaped island that didn't really have much drainage associated with it, because with the landscape island, there really isn't any need for drainage. That water is presumably soaks right into the ground. So we changed that what's the change on the drainage system throughout the system? So we went back and reviewed those things, and both Holmes and McGrath, Tim Santos, did a great job in providing the information, answering the questions, and getting things done. So from my perspective, that went very well. The board also asked the staff to take a look at 587 Main Street. So in the case of 587 Main Street, we are also in the midst of a technical review, trying to determine what was built without the approved changes compared to what was built permitted by both the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Planning Board on May 29th referred changes, site plan changes to the planning staff. The ZBA was asked to review those changes as well. The initial request to the ZBA was made less than 24 hours prior to their posted meeting, so they weren't able to entertain it at that point. At May 23rd, the ZBA didn't have a quorum of folks eligible to vote on those changes, and so they had to move the meeting back to May 30th. So when the ZBA met on May 30th, they voted that based on the breadth of changes to hold a hearing and not approve it administratively, and that hearing with the ZBA is on July 11th, 2019. The planner and the zoning administrator recently met with the town manager's office regarding their perception about the pace of zoning and planning departments in terms of new business being stuck and unable to open, in particular the folks from Longfellows, as well as Mr. Daly, who's been greatly impacted by the inability to open the building because of the unauthorized changes to the site. On May 29th, I forwarded a copy. This is the day after we had met, and the board instructed the staff to proceed administratively on this. So on May 29th, I forwarded a copy of the Engineering Division's inspection that Ira had requested. Within that report, we had requested a red line as-built plan showing the difference between what was approved and what was billed, so we know exactly what those changes are without having to try to ferret them off of two separate plans and two separate scales. Noreen Stockman, our zoning administrator, and I are both helping to have these site plan issues identified and responded to prior to the ZBA's hearing on July 11th. I reached out to Kevin Clower with engineering's report the day after the planning board, and I reached out again on Monday to ask if we had an update on that plan, and Kevin had noted that he will reach out to Cape and Islands on the status of the requested plan. So we're moving as best we can to evaluate what those changes are and look to see if they're fine or if they're going to have to do some additional work, much like JML had to. But we haven't got that information yet. As we talked about before, there's sometimes the perception that it's the government that's holding people up. But we're just trying to make sure, in that abundance of caution that I typically bring with me, that we know what the changes are and what's going on there. So in the absence of that information from those folks, we can't make those determinations. So as soon as we've got it, we'll be on it, and we'll be looking what those changes are, and our goal is to have all those things buttoned up prior to the ZBA's hearing on July 11th. But it's very unfortunate that folks who had designs to be in that building for quite some time are currently not able to move into the building. And we're doing the best we can to rectify it, but once again, as we talked about, in the absence of information, it's hard to make a decision about is this okay or is this not okay.
Second page of the agenda has disappeared. Thank you, Tom. My second page of the agenda has disappeared. I'm asking.
Oh, yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we need an update.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
I thought it was rather interesting. In the trail of information here, it shows that the attorney sent to the engineer on 5/29 a request for the red line drawing, and yet he's writing again 2 weeks later on 6/17, yesterday, that he hasn't gotten it yet. We've had a similar problem with this engineer on another project on getting information. I'm curious why it's taken so long to do a red line drawing. It can just be hand drawn. It doesn't have to be that extensive. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, I tell people on a pretty regular basis, you know, I struggle to keep what's going on in my office, much less knowing what's going on in other people's offices. But I know in the economy that we're currently in, everybody's pushing to get things done. Longfellow has a lot of projects out there, and they're using, most of the projects I've seen are through Cape and Islands Engineering. So I can only assume that it's queued up in their workload, and they just haven't gotten to it yet. So I don't know why it is, but I didn't want to have it just fall by the wayside and have it ignored. So once again, having an expectation we see something like that, particularly considering the number of phone calls that have gone to various officials in town about their concern about, Mr. Daley in particular, about, the very unfortunate circumstance he finds himself in, through no fault of his own, to not be able to move into a building that, he's got his equipment and things like that and ready to move in. So I can't tell you why we haven't got a plan back, other than people are busy and maybe it's queued up. But as soon as we have one, we'll be acting on it. Noreen and I talk about this, at least on a weekly basis, as to where we're at with that, if they've gotten anything, if I've gotten anything. So we're doing our best to move the ball. I think the board has demonstrated here that we're not sort of anti-development. In the case of Woods Hole Group, we had a special called meeting in order to finalize a site plan that had taken quite a while, so it would be ready for the ZBA. So my perception is that we're doing what we can to keep people on task and keep people's projects moving within the rules that we have. So we're doing our very best to get those things done, but in the absence of something to review, it's really hard to say, this is fine, that's not fine.
I think you understand my point. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, again, updated form-based code. We have a little blurb in our packet too from Heather.
Thank you. I was hoping that was in your packets, because I don't know if I saw it in mine, but I know I did want to.
stage.
Excellent. Thank you, Michaela. And we did give Corey the night off. I thought, since Michaela is here, will be here starting in July on a much limited basis, I wanted to get her as much comfort and familiarity with the board and you with her. So I asked Corey if he wouldn't be offended if I said, is it okay if you don't come to the meeting tonight, so we don't have to have everybody here? And he was fine with that. But Corey's been very involved in form-based code, in working with the Cape Cod Commission on our project for the missing middle, the community resilience by design project. So the chair at the time, Mr. Fox, had noted that we were behind on the schedule. So what you have in your package is the existing schedule from our PowerPoint presentation that we did at the joint meeting with the selectmen and other folks at Falmouth Academy back in April. So I checked in with our contact there, Heather Harper. Sharon Rooney has also been very engaged in this as well with the commission. She recently retired, so God bless Sharon to get to that point. So I asked Heather last week, can you give me an update on where we're at with the status of the form-based code? The board was inquiring at their meeting on 6/4. She said, well, as you know, the form-based framework has taken a bit longer than we'd hoped. They expect the final draft this week for editing and formatting, and that will serve as the launching point for working with Falmouth. Because we talked about, we're building off of the grant that they got through the work they did with Union Studios. And so when that work is finalized, that gives us sort of the launching point for the work they're doing for us, which is essentially developing an RFP that we can go out and ask for funding at town meeting in November to bring someone on and help us start to develop the form-based code zoning for the town. So we are behind schedule, as Mr. Fox had pointed out, but the folks at the Cape Cod Commission, Heather in particular, thinks that we'll be able to get up to speed over the summer, have that scope of work done. So we've got an RFP that we can request funding at this town meeting in November. With that funding in hand, we'll be able to hire someone, have them work on the form-based code for us, and anticipate that we would be working on that for the months. I've plugged in a year to assume that if we have funding available to move forward with this at November 2019, that we would award a contract to create that zoning in December 2019, and we would begin public hearings in the winter of 2020 to adopt zoning for the Davis Straits for town meeting for November 2020. So We are gonna have a busy summer between, these sort of things and some of the other things that we sort of talked about on looking at some of our other rules and regulations. And I don't want to jump to the next line about design review standards and things like that, but that's where we're at with Davis Straits. We're a little behind. Other things will catch up, and it's comfortable that we'll get there.
So where we are right now is waiting for the Cape Cod Commission to finalize, apparently within the next 2 weeks, a request for proposals for a consultant to draft up our form-based zoning proposal. Is that it?
Yeah, they have to finish their project, their Community Resilience by Design, which is basically where our form-based code framework comes out of. So we're sort of, it's a building block. They have to get that part done in order to move on to the next part.
Right. I'm wondering somewhere in the schedule, because we're familiar with the Davis Straits feasibility study that the Cape Cod Commission did, and a presentation had been made here and a presentation on form-based zoning, but they're a while ago now, and I wonder if it would be useful for advancing approval of the contract for the consultant, if we could have a presentation for town meeting about the feasibility study and its general outline of where exactly it is, what are the boundaries of that space that this will cover, what are our hopes for it, just some overview presentation as part of the general overview that's usually given at town meeting, to reintroduce it, really.
I think that's a great idea. And in the same way that we hold hearings for zoning changes, we could do something quite similar, how we invite town meeting members to our hearings, and then we invite them to the second round of hearings, and then we send them a video link to the hearings that they may or may not have attended, so they'll be able to see it here, see it live, or see it from the comfort of their home using the video link that we submit to
I'd
them.
like to circle around back on that as part of that presentation. I've been concerned over time we all have, with multifamily zoning, and it's been hooked to the Davis Straits project as a very good place to start, so that one kind of depends on the other, so it looks like nothing's happening on multifamily zoning, because we don't say it, but we know here that it's part of the Davis Straits, but to be sure that that's part of the presentation at town meeting, that it's clear that this is leading toward creating a multifamily housing zone in that area.
Absolutely.
So next is the update on the Cape Cod Commission LCP procedures.
Madam Chairman,
Nothing yet, as far as I know.
my dog is feeling better. He ate my homework. So I'm not prepared to talk about the LCP proceedings, but I hope to be ready for our meeting on the 25th.
Well, I talked with Charlie McCaffrey briefly, and I guess things are still not moving very quickly with the commission on that.
Well, I think that we're in a pretty good position on moving forward with LCP, but I wanted to bring the board up to speed on the LCP procedures in the context of the regional policy plan. Because frankly, with the adoption of the regional policy plan, it's sort of that reset button that I've talked to several of you about frankly going back out into the community and doing a very robust public engagement as part of our LCP update. To go back out there and review that vision statement, those goals and things like that, to make sure that's still what we believe the community is looking for. Now, the interesting thing about the LCP and the regional policy plan is that your LCP, your policies in your LCP should be compatible with the regional policy plan. And then they further go on to say, then, so if you do an LCP, those policies, those goals should be, comport with the regional policies. And then after you bring your plan to town meeting and it's certified by the commission, then you have 2 years to bring your zoning into align with your policy plan. The interesting about that is if you approve the LCP at town meeting, that's a simple majority vote. To create the zoning that may come out of that, that's a 2/3 vote. So I don't know that the Cape Cod Commission is going to take umbrage with the fact that a majority plus one liked the plan, but 2 out of 3 didn't like the zoning that goes with it. But I think there are a lot of upsides to doing the LCP in conjunction with that, as we talked about before, based on development agreements, which allows us to build things in areas that we've identified, such as the Falmouth Industrial Park. A building that's over 10,000 square feet in the industrial park doesn't have to go to the Cape Cod Commission as a development regional impact, so we're able to sort of put development in those places where we want them at. And I think one of those things we're gonna be looking at is in the Davis Straits area, is that we're looking at buildings that are larger than 10,000 square feet in the Davis Straits. And we frankly would like to have an agreement in place, a development agreement in place with them, because we've worked on the zoning and worked through the Cape Cod Commission on the Davis Straits reset to ensure that every project that comes into the Davis Straits doesn't have to be referred to the Cape Cod Commission like the hotel that is currently being discussed by the Cape Cod Commission. So there's a lot of upside from my perspective to doing the work that it's gonna take. And it's not a simple sort of thing, doing this outreach. Best case scenario for doing an update to your comprehensive plan is, a year if you're hitting all your stops to have those meetings and get that work done. So we're looking at, Davis Straits, we're looking at recodification, we're looking at talking this summer on design standards and subdivision regulations. So we may get a little bit of a breather in July as we ramp this up, but we may have we may have a weekly meeting in August, trying to get things done, particularly in the context of recodification. Because as you saw, as you've discussed, some of the members who are engaged in the recodification here at the table are like, are we gonna be ready for November town meeting?
I'm betting not, but, and Tom says he's gonna make a liar out of me.
I think I said I hope to prove you wrong.
I know that's what you said.
So, there's a lot on our plate, and a lot that we've chosen to, and we're gonna try to get those things done properly, but, things take time,
And
Brings us to design standards.
Corey put together a whole list of references that we can be looking at for sources.
So, with our, with some of our remaining budget funds in this fiscal year, we are looking at advertising for a couple of things, at developing our design standards, as well as an update to our subdivision plans, our subdivision regulations. There's a few things in our subdivision regulations that don't really make a whole lot of sense, that we, they're not they don't make a whole lot, but they're just so dated that there's been a lot better work that's been put out there. So we have looked at a couple of different models that the engineering department has recommended from Holliston, from Barnstable County. So we're looking at holding hearings on those over the summer and inviting the development community in to talk about what those subdivision standards are, what those changes might be. And those include things like stormwaters and inspections and all those other protocols. So we're looking at holding hearings over the summer for design guidelines. And design guidelines would be a regulation versus zoning, because if you have a regulation, typically you can waive that if there's some compelling public purpose for it. You can't waive zoning. Zoning, if you don't want to follow the zoning, that's a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So those regulations, in my opinion, design standards are more usable and more flexible as a regulation. And the board, much like subdivision regulations, can hold a hearing and adopt those regulations. They don't have to go to town meeting. So we'll have those, sort of that starting point of the Cape Cod Commission's design standards, and looking at those and tweaking those as we see fit over the summer.
Any committee reports? You wanna go first, and then Paul?
Okay, but it's not a committee report, it's actually on the design standards.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were finished with that.
Well, no, because we all received the lengthy list of links that Corey put together, and I looked at them all, they're really interesting. But I just wanted to share with the rest of the board, the ones that really apply the most to us are the Cape Cod Commission's 2 documents. And looking at them, they're illustrated, I thought they were pretty good. They would be really the backbone of whatever it is we're going to do going forward for design standards and probably for form-based zoning. But I wonder if others reacted in the same way.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah, close to home.
Yeah, if we've got a wheel, we don't have to invent it. Nice. Paul?
Committee reports. Excuse me. Coastal zone, excuse me, I don't know why I have a frog. CRAC committee has received an award of a grant from the Municipal Vulnerability Program, and they're preparing a contract to do the evaluation of Surf Drive Beach. And the contract will be Woods Hole Group, since they did the original MVP program, and is an extension of the same program going on. So that's moving quickly. The other one is we have indication we may have received a grant also from the Coastal Zone Management for a sediment management plan along the west coast. That is not official yet, but waiting to hear on that. The problem is both these contracts have to be done within the state's fiscal year, so they drop dead on June 30th. No, there's not a lot of time, so it's important to move these things forward very quickly.
June 30, 2020.
Yeah, June.
I didn't want to give the impression the state was so short that they were going to give us 2 weeks.
No, if the contract is signed by September, for example, only have 9 months to do it. So it's, and for that reason, the scope was shortened somewhat, because they have to be able to do it within that timeframe.
And did you want to, if I may, Madam Chair, did you want to talk a little bit about the Coastal Resilience Action Committee's request to come visit with the planning board?
Well, I think it was the planning board request to goes to reaction committee to come, and I believe you do have a date for that.
I think we're talking about June 25th, weren't we?
Yes.
A week from now.
Yeah, so the chairman is supposed to come on June 25th to talk about some of these things that are going on. I think it's an important element, not only because of the local comprehensive plan, but whatever recommends comes out with, the planning board will have to consider those issues.
Thank you. And that's it for community reports, yes? Okay. Any announcements? Oh, Jim?
I have an announcement. Friends of Falmouth Station is having an ice cream social on July 6th, Saturday, from 2 to 4 p.m. We're gonna have the Jeff Lowe Trio playing there. We found a sponsor, so we can actually have a really good band. 352 Main Street has sponsored the event for giving us the money for the band. And we've actually come up with a great idea to build a stage that just sets on the railroad tracks. So it's landscaping, it just sets on the wood, it's temporary, it can go away. And the EDIC has funded the cost of that. So we should have a really nice setup and be able to have other groups and things play there with. We've now got a music venue and a stage and a building. And so the Friends of Falmouth Stations is catching a little wind and things are going well. So I hope the whole town comes. We're gonna be a special deal, ice cream and a hot dog for $5, and then half the price, 2-for-1 ice cream for anything else. And the station grill will be open for any other food throughout the whole concert. So
What's the time, Jim?
2 to 4, Saturday, July 6th. So you can ride your bike. Anyone in town can come by, ride their bike there. It's an afternoon type thing. We've always been talking about an ice cream social, but we've got it put together and got funding for it.
That's
So
great.
it is starting.
That's really
Can I ask you a
great.
question on that?
Yes.
Sponsored by 352 Main. What's 352 Main?
It's a building on Main Street.
Oh, the one on Main Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
352 Main. They've changed the name. I mean, was called Library Square. No one knows where Library Square is, so we're remarketing it as 352 Main. And I got the owner to give us the money to hire a band, $400. So it's, gets it started. I found getting bands to play for free just doesn't work.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to get money. And so now I've reached out and started to do that. So anyways, I hope everyone can put it on their calendar. It is scheduled, it's approved by the EDIC, and publicity will probably going out this week, but I wanted to announce it here tonight because I had a chance.
Oh, and you know, we have a lot of listeners,
Yeah,
so
That's great.
that's
Someplace to
wonderful.
bring my grandchildren on Saturday.
it should be
Okay.
fun.
So we've got, general correspondence here. Let's see, that's the Buchanan one.
Future agenda items.
Yeah, well, there's a complaint here that doesn't really have,
Yeah.
it was sent through to us. It doesn't really have anything to do with us, but it's a general complaint about, again, it's got to do with if things aren't inspected and done properly, years later, there are all these problems that we run into.
I think that letter actually said something different. That letter says, why aren't we controlling the size and design of the buildings in the neighborhood? And the real question is,
Oh,
we
I'm
don't
sorry, I
do
got it.
we don't do design review on residential homes.
Yeah, and I
That-
got those two twisted.
Right, you got them twisted,
Sorry.
right. You know, the planning board does not review single-family homes. You go by 20% lot coverage, 10-foot setbacks, side and rear, 20-foot, 25 in the front, and 35 feet high, and after that, it's whatever you want. State building code falls in. That letter kind of expects, why aren't we doing something about it? And it's because we don't.
We don't.
We don't do single-family homes.
And we don't do it because,
Well, we never have. We've done commercial. We could, but I don't think we should either. I think at some point, we don't want to be.
it's not a state law that we don't.
No, it's
To
just,
some towns?
I don't know. I think if we wanted to do it, should develop form-based code for every neighborhood, but that's a huge undertaking.
Santa Fe does.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way to do it, is you develop a form-based code for waterfront houses, for neighborhoods, but let's get it done one place first before we even think about it going to that level. I think it's, my opinion, that's way too much control.
I just
Yeah, and
wondered.
I Google Earthed it, and 140, this is Allen Street?
Yes,
Yeah, 140 Allen Street is a good-sized house.
but it's allowed.
Yeah, oh, I know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I know.
20% lot coverage, 35 feet high,
Yeah.
setbacks.
Yeah.
We don't tell them, no, that's too big for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's a special permit.
Mhm.
Okay, that's neighborhood characteristics, if there's certain things we allow by right, and that is building a single-family home to the standards is a by right use,
Yeah,
and you don't do a special permit.
Okay.
So the neighbors don't get to say what your house
looks like.
looks like unless you're trying to exceed the existing zoning.
Right.
And that letter kind of implied that we have the right to do that, and we don't.
Don't. That's a very good explanation of that letter, thank you, and I did confuse the two, I flipped them around. This other one is from Donna L. Brennan, 637 Gifford Street. It's in regard to Forest Cove condominium at 637 Gifford Street, and there are a lot of things that are wrong with it. And,
And on that one, I have a comment too.
go ahead.
It is one of the things that my 90-year-old mother has to live in that neighborhood, and I happened to pull out on a rainy day and look at the drain, and the drain's sitting up 6 inches high with no water going into it, and the slope going down. It couldn't have been built as originally designed.
Well, and I believe that's, not to, cast aspersion on anybody else, but I think that's a 40B, and I think it gets back to my point that here we are, and when was that development built?
It was first approved 10 years ago.
So here we are 10 years later, and there's an issue with why isn't this done right and why
Right.
isn't that
Right.
done right? The developer of record has likely left the property. Any changes like that, any large remedies have to be done through the homeowners association, and that puts the burden on those people who moved in maybe second or third tier of going, why do I have to pay for something I thought was fine when I moved in? And which is why I'm the person that I am about subdivisions.
How do we respond to these letters where our hands are tied for one reason or another? Does your office write back to them to say, well, interesting point, but here's where we are on that? Or what kind of response does the sender get?
I have not spoken to those folks because of the nature of the development. It's a 40B. I don't know that Noreen has or not, but when I get complaints, whether they're from some of the developments we talked about or others, I do my very best to first off look at the file and see, was this built to the requirement? And if not, in the case of one, we went back and looked and said, yeah, this was designed as required. Went back to see that the board had released the bond for, years ago, and we had no leverage to go back and try to fix things. You can't hold a bond forever and ever. That's why you make sure things are right in the first place. To the best of our ability, release the bond and let those folks go on their way. But the critical thing is, and the town of Kingston had this issue where when they did a 40B, they weren't requiring the applicant, the developer, to go through the same inspection protocol that you would have to do for a subdivision, because they thought that was onerous for affordable housing. If it's a standard, sort of best management practice, that's what you should be doing. So I don't know what the requirements are here, but if you're gonna build something that looks like a neighborhood, then you should follow that same process, whether it's under your subdivision regulations or your 40B, that don't render the project uneconomic. And typically, those inspections and things like that make for a better project, and make for better neighbors, and make for people, happier as they can be in the neighborhood that they're in.
I was just hoping that
Chair.
there'd be a process of response to people who write to us hoping for some relief from something, some reaction, that we would respond back in a way that would give them a direction in which they could go to pursue a solution to their problem. On the forum that was held about sober houses, I think we were all there, we all went. And when Dave Vieira said, if you want to do something about this, write to the federal government, because they control the statute that's put us in this position, so that's what you need to do, write to our representatives. Well, here, you'd be
These weren't
writing back,
addressed to us, though.
oh, but
We have copies
We're
in our
CC'd,
folder,
yes.
but they weren't addressed to us.
but when they are addressed to us, that there would be a direct response with some avenue of recourse.
Yes. I talk to people, I don't always get a chance to call people back right away, because sometimes I just don't. I just got too many things to do, trying to get to all those sort of things. But to the best of my knowledge, I have not ignored anyone's pleas for
Great,
information
thank
and
you.
questions and things like that.
John?
Just to clarify, in the town of Falmouth, the 40B development roads do have to conform to the town of Falmouth standards. They do get inspected. And Forest Cove, I believe, is still under construction. So until they do the final coat of paving, it may be that some of the drains do not capture all the water. I haven't been there, I don't know, but at the end, they should capture all the water, but they're under construction right now.
Okay, thank you.
Future agenda items,
I got some.
okay.
Not necessarily next week or two, but I think there are two items. One is, get an update of zoning recodification, because we're still shooting for November town meeting, as far as I know. So it'd be nice to have an update on that, when appropriate. And the second one is, understand the hotel on Scranton Avenue was referred to the county commission, and they opened a hearing, but the developer was not prepared to go forward on that. Be nice to know what rationale is going on, whether that project's moving forward, or whether they abandoned the project, or,
Well, if you got a couple of seconds, I'll give you the latest update on,
it's not on the agenda, but.
yeah, okay. But we have
Unless you
stuff.
want to.
We have stuff on both of those things. The zoning recodification group is meeting tomorrow,
Tomorrow.
What's tomorrow? A meeting?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Thank you.
And totally drew a blank. What was the second thing you asked about?
Scranton Ave,
Thank you, Scranton. Is that what you said, Scranton?
the hotel,
Oh, thank you. Like, Scranton.
hotel on Scranton Ave.
Yeah, they did have a hearing, a procedural hearing, to make sure that they didn't have a constructive approval because there weren't any plans in from the developer. Got an email from John Eidman at the Cape Cod Commission of the Day, says they now have plans. They should have been copied to you. I haven't seen them. I asked. So we'll be meeting with John Eidman and the Cape Cod Commission staff here probably in the next week or so, for him to get me up to speed on what's going on with the development of regional impact.
It sounds like it's moving forward then.
Correct. They do have plans into the commission that the commission is currently vetting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be on the agenda.
I know.
Okay.
Everybody ready to adjourn?
Yes.
Move.